Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to the album wrap episode of season 12 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Today, I'm joined, as always, on these episodes by my good pal, John Paulsen, to talk about Echo. How's it going, John?
It's going well. We have a Liverpool win this weekend and a Man United loss, so I guess that's about as good as things get. Although I was rooting for Man U against Arsenal, but it is what it is. We are kicking off a new EPL season, and we're kicking off this podcast about Echo. I This is a interesting album in his discography, just sort of wrapping up the Rick Rubin era,
Yeah,
and I'm sure you talked about it on your song by song episodes, but Petty a bit annoyed with Rubin not being around as much for the mixing portion. Is that correct?
yeah,
And then Tom and Mike were also, involved as producers, and it has this. I mean, the sound is really the same as the Wildflower sound and the She's the One sound, and it's just a. This is a when I think Petty really settled into his sound for the remainder of his career, because I think you could put up really any album after this and it sounds kind of similar.
yeah.
Whereas Full Moon Fever and Into the Great Wide Open had the Jeff Lynne, and then before that, Jimmy Iovine, his sound a little bit different. But this is a good album, and I think the maybe the main thing that I thought about initially putting this on was, it's 15 tracks, and we're really now in 1999 getting into the CD era where they are more making these albums thinking that the CD is the primary,
Yeah.
vehicle for it. And so now you go from 44 minutes to 74 or 80-minute CDs, depending on the era. And I think there's a little bit of excess. And not with Petty, it's not bad, his excess. Like, it's getting these B side, like maybe these would have been B sides, or they would have been stray tracks perhaps, and ended up on a box set, and we would have raved about them. But now they're ending up on the CD itself. It's about a 62 minute, and that's about what Wildflowers was as well. But Wildflowers is a whole different, I think, level for him. I think
For
his
sure.
highlights could have met Wildflowers, and certainly met She's the One, the highlights from this album. And I would say some of the filler or album tracks, probably wouldn't have made Wildflowers, but they're still pretty good because they're Petty songs.
Yeah.
So I think, revisiting it, there's definitely some tracks that this is me. You can just put this on repeat every time I discuss this with you as I listen to some of these albums for the, 50th time in 2 months or whatever, preparing for this, just because I want to really see what stands out. And there's a lot of tracks on here that I really like now more than I did, a couple months ago. So we can certainly get into that. What do you like? Where do you place it within his discography? And like, how is this for you as a follow up to Wildflowers and to She's the One?
It definitely, I think there's a sort of thematic inevitability about it, almost with obviously, Wildflowers, the marriage is really breaking down, the marriage to Jane is really breaking down at that point. So it feels like, and obviously then he gets into the situation with drug addiction, all that kind of stuff. So it feels like it's that natural end point to this part of his life overall. And I think it's one of those two. It's kind of like I almost think of it almost like Southern Accents and Mojo, where it's an outlier in a specific way, right? It doesn't really. It's not Petty trying to write the big hit. It's not sort of a collection of just jaunty pop songs. It's this thing that is its own thing. So it's a difficult one to really sort of line up with the rest of his catalog for me. But just in terms of musicianship and execution, yeah, some fantastic moments on this album, I would say.
Looks like he divorced Jane in '96 after 22 years of marriage. So, and this came out in '99, probably was written and recorded '97, '98, maybe
Yeah,
'99. So kind of the aftermath, I guess, and where he was at in his life. Um, you can hear it. Like, I think Wildflowers was the divorce album, or it was preparing for a divorce album, and then this is the aftermath.
Yeah, and
Um,
people say that this is the divorce album. I mean, Tom says that
yeah.
in conversation topics. This is the divorce album, and because I think that that's with Wildflowers, he's not he's not gone through the divorce yet. You know what I mean? So he's not actually really writing about it. He's writing about relationship trouble and some of those
Yeah.
things, but he's not actually talking about the divorce. Where with this one, then it's kind of where that's come into focus, right? And I mean, I think that that maybe is what makes this one a little less accessible for some people because it did hit number 10 on the Billboard and it's the last Heartbreakers record to be certified by the RIAA, the Highway Companion notwithstanding, but that's a solo, obviously. And then he didn't have a charting single from this album on the Billboard. Of course, we got some stuff on the US rock chart and the AAA, but unusual for Petty to not have something at least hit, sort of the top 100 on the Billboard.
So 11 of the 15 songs have been streamed less than 1 million times, which is criminal. We got to
Yeah.
fix that. Uh, we do have Counting on You at 998,000, so we can probably just with your listenership on this podcast probably
We
can
can bump
push us
that.
over the top or get that one over 1 million. Uh, but yeah, a lot of them are 400 to 600,000. So and those are mostly on the second half of the album. Um, but the highlights are quite good. And let's just like I think we should just go through
Okay.
the first five tracks. Just for the listeners, Kevin asked me to sort of lead the podcast and try to host it a bit better so that we can get through it in a little different way this time. And Room at the Top, I gave this a
Oh,
9.5. Like this is 7.4, 7.5 million streams. That's low for me. Um, I think it should be higher than that. Great track. One of his like most beautiful songs, if you listen to
agreed.
it lyrically and musically. A great way to kick off the album, but you are definitely getting the vibe. Like he
Yeah.
didn't open with Free Girl Now. He opened with Room at the Top. So what do you make of that track?
Well, I mean, it is one of the greats, right? I mean, I think I said this offline or something that it's one of those songs that if you're putting together a playlist of, let's say, 20 songs or something to give to someone who doesn't really know Petty beyond the hits, this is one that's going to go on there. I think for pretty much everyone. I think every single Petty head would put this song on there because it's one of those that just resonates with all of us. And of course, you've got, that please, I love you, please love me line in there. You've got the brilliance of Mike Campbell coming in with those heavy guitars and the drums and whatnot. So it's just, to me, it's one of those songs that it's essential Petty. Like it's one of the sort of the very, very top tier. And I give it a 10. I'm really curious where this lost half a mark for you. I'm just kind of curious how come it's not a 10?
Just don't hand out tens willy-nilly. Uh, but yeah, it's certainly deserving. Yeah, you mentioned that lyric. That's one that really stood out to me as well. Please love me, I'm not so bad, and I love you so. That moment
Yeah.
towards the end of the track is just really gorgeous.
When I love from conversations with Tom Petty, Paul Zollo's book, Tom says it was a great example of the heartbreakers at work. On my own, I would never have arrived at that arrangement of the song, but they really took it somewhere that it would never have got to by myself. And I think that that's one thing. We'll sort of talk about this a little bit later with one song in particular, I think, but with Tom being in the place he was in, just emotionally and even physically in some ways, right? It always feels like this album was Mike and Benmont especially stepping in and saying, "Don't worry, mate, we got you. We'll cover off where you're not quite. If you're not running at 100% Petty, we can fill in those spots and we can make sure that everything sounds as good as it should."
Yeah, this falls into that category of the mid-tempo banger. There's so many from we talked about it in the previous albums that
Yeah,
weren't released as singles because he kind of describes them as ballads, and I guess you could describe it as a ballad. And he didn't think early in his career that ballads would do very well, and then he had some ballad hits, and I think now he's like recognizing, okay, this is one of the best songs in the album. I'm going to go ahead and release it as a single, and it peaked at 19 on the rock chart and went all the way to number one on the AAA
yeah,
adult album alternative chart. So he was certainly finding his audience on those types of stations, even though those weren't like the mainstream type radio stations at that point.
yeah.
So um, it's the
Do you
second most
do you think I was just going
streamed
to jump
song.
in
Oh,
quickly? Sorry, I was going to jump in and ask you because we talk about this and we use that expression quite a lot of mid-tempo banger, right? I don't think there's anyone who does that better than Petty. I think you could probably lump Springsteen into it in terms of Springsteen also is good at it, but I don't think anyone does it better than Petty. Like when you listen to those that sort of range of this kind of song and Free Fallin' and those types of tunes, he was so good at finding the balance between it rocking, and having that little bit of sort of power to it, and yet being a slower, more deliberate song. Like he's just an absolute master at that kind of song for me.
Yeah, The Wild One Forever, Surrender, Insider,
Hmm.
Straight into Darkness, The Best of Everything, It'll All Work
Yeah,
Out. I mean, crawling back to you, I mean, it goes on, the list goes on and on with these types of songs that traditionally wouldn't be big radio hits, but are just really important songs in his discography.
yeah, agreed.
Counting on You, track two. I certainly think this is merits just some discussion. This whole first five, like the first five tracks, I think are all really solid. This one reminds me of Crawling Back to You. Um, Another kind of mid-tempo, but a little more up-tempo than Room at the Top. Didn't quite
Yeah,
get as loud, as Room at the Top did with some of that guitar. I really like the moment at the 123 mark where he goes oh oh oh
yeah.
as he gets into his lyric. Really solid second track.
And it's important to, like you said, I mean, we start with Room at the Top. We don't start with Free Girl Now. So we're not opening the album with the big rock moment on, or one of the big rock moments on the album. But I think Room at the Top going into Counting on You, it really does sort of really establishes that tone. I mean, Room at the Top could come in, you could think, okay, well, he's opening with something a little bit different. And it's an iconic song. So I kind of see that. Then you could go into Free Girl Now. It's okay, well, we're going to get back into the rock and roll. But because he puts Counting on You there, it really sort of sets up that darkness really, really well. And he lifts it here and there, but I think that that's deliberate to sort of say this is what this album's going to be about.
As we do this podcast, he does such a good job with his sequencing on his albums, like
Yeah.
just kind of switching up things and not having two songs that are too similar next to each other, and changing up the variety, the tempo, the type of song, acoustic or electric or loud or quiet. He just and this is another really good example of it. Free Girl Now. I mean, I gave Counting on You a 7.5. And then Free Girl Now, I think, is one of his maybe most underrated singles.
Yeah.
I gave it a 9. To me, it sounds like a classic, something that Mike Campbell came up with, but he was not credited on this track,
Yeah.
uh, other than producer and guitar, but not as a songwriter. It was the third most streamed song, 4.1 million. If you compare it to You Wreck Me, I think it's there quality
Yeah.
wise. It did not get anywhere near the number of streams, like 66 million streams, I think, for You Wreck Me, and only 4 million or and change for Free Girl Now. Subject matter is interesting. It's sort of that Me Too discussion prior to all that happening, way before that all happened.
Hmm.
But talking about a boss who's kind of abusing an employee. Number five on the rock chart, number three on the AAA chart. So this was like one of the bigger hits on the album. I think fans obviously like it because it's a banger.
Well, it's kind of funny, right? I mean, there is a little bit of he's sort of taking a light-hearted approach to some of the lyrics, right? When he touched your butt and throwing that line in there, it just kind of gives it that little bit of levity. I wonder with that direct comparison with You Wreck Me, because You Wreck Me was covered by a few people, and also they played that on SNL, right? So I don't know if did they ever play Free Girl Now? Because I was looking, they only played it 47 times live, which I found really surprising
Yeah.
because you would think that that would be a mainstay on the Echo tour, and then one of those that you would sort of go back to as, when you pick those two or three songs that you're going to rotate and play, give the fans something they haven't heard for a while. You sort of think that this one would be a really natural fit for that kind of thing. So I was really surprised that it had only been played 47 times.
And you said that this was sort of written about Dana's experience at a job,
Yeah.
right? So I wonder if the subject matter was such that she didn't want him to go back to it too often and be reminded of that job. I don't know. Like I'm just sort of speculating, like if his wife is sort of dealing with that trauma in her
Right.
past, would she want to hear the song out on the road very often, And then I
From
guess
what I've seen,
oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it is similar in structure and sort of sound as You Wreck Me, and You Wreck Me was a bigger hit. So if they're going to play one, they're probably going to play You Wreck Me,
Yeah,
as opposed to playing Free Girl Now.
that's true too. I mean, my thought. I mean, Dana, I think loves this song. Like I've seen her
Oh yeah,
comments on Talk
okay,
Any Nation and that, and so it's one of those ones where because I mean, anytime someone writes something defending you, especially,
yeah,
I mean, telling you I love you, I love you, I love you, all that kind of that's great too. But someone who's coming out and that, like you said, that being very clearly on the side of the female side of that argument, it is an empowering song, and I can't see any reason why you wouldn't want that played all the time. And you
yeah.
think about it too, it would be an anthem for the Me Too movement now, right? Like if this was
It,
written now, like it would be latched onto for sure.
for sure. He was the first major artist. He released this as an MP3 for free, I think on
Yeah,
mp3.com, and left it up for a day or two before his record company said, "Okay, that's probably enough of that, giving away your music for free." And now look where we are with
yeah,
streaming and
yeah.
everything. It's crazy. Track four, Lonesome Sundown. Um, Slow and Sad. This is like pensive dad rock. Um, and you can really, this is where we're like between these first four or five songs, you can really see where he was headed with this album and the kind of the tone of it and the story of it. What did you make of Lonesome Sundown?
It's one of those that I'd written. I was just looking back at all my notes, and it sort of reminds me a little bit of a song called "Strangers" by the Kinks. And I don't know how big of a Kinks fan you are, but to me, I always because I've never heard him talk about the Kinks, and there are two or three times in his catalog where I think that's a Kinks song. And there's one coming up on the next album that's really, I mean, it's just pure freaking Ray Davis, right? And the Kinks, it's funny because when I started, I should say that today, as we're recording, 4 years ago today, I released the first episode on Rocking Around with You of the podcast. And as I was sitting down thinking about doing this podcast, I remember distinctly thinking, I could do one on the Kinks actually, because I love the Kinks and I know that catalog quite well. So the Kinks were almost the band that I talked about rather than Petty. But yeah, I mean, this one's got that really nice. It's got a 9 chord pattern, chord progression. Moves across both the minor third and minor six, as well as the major fourth and fifth. So it's got that really satisfying progression to it. Where I mean, it's just a beautiful, beautiful song, and it's one of those I think, like you said, as a deep cut, it's one of those every time it comes on, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. This is beautiful.
Strangers is a great Kings track and one of
Okay,
my
you know that one,
favorites.
okay.
So yeah, I'm aware of it. And Petty did cover "You Really Got Me" quite often, and was part of the Fillmore as well. So I know the Kinks
Right.
were some sort of influence on him as well. So that connection makes sense. Track
You
five,
know that.
"Swingin'" was the most stream song on the album. 17 on the rock chart, 11 on the AAA chart. Didn't maybe chart as well as some of the other singles, but
Yeah.
or as high, I guess, but still was a like a non Hot 100 or Hot 200 hit for him, and obviously a fan favorite, 11.6 million streams. I think it's pretty similar in tone to another track on this album, Billy the Kid, in terms of just being resilient, uh, defiant.
Hmm.
Um, so the tone, the story and the plot is a little bit the same, but I think that's maybe he was sort of in that defiant mode, just trying to get through his, life at that
Yeah.
point. Another mid-tempo melody that is just fantastic.
Well, and I mean, the clue's in the title too, right? Because it's
Yeah,
got that swing. And Steve Ferrone's drum part on this is just fantastic. I think it's one of those songs that Petty does as well as anyone when he goes off on that little flight of fancy and starts telling a story. And of course, we know that this one was basically ad libbed. He came up with
yeah,
most of the lyrics of this just off the cuff, which is again, when you think about that, you just think, what? How'd you come up with this? I mean, it's one thing to do like just a straight rock and roll song and throw in or blues or something where you can wing that, but to come up with sort of it is a fairly cohesive narrative about this person. To do that off the dome is that's crazy, man. I mean, Dylan can do it. I don't know about too many other people who can do that kind of stuff better than Petty.
yeah. And they did. I think they did two run-throughs on it, or they
Hmm.
did two recordings of it. I think they may have taken the second one, so maybe he had kind of worked it out. Maybe the first one was a little rougher, but who knows, right? With him, he just ad-libbed "Wildflowers." That's the track. So like that's how good. That's how good. Like I was listening to it thinking about the fact that he had ad-libbed it, and it was like this one section where she was over 21, in trouble with the law, and it didn't phase her none. She called her
Yeah.
mother-in-law and said, "I need a little money. I know I can count on you." After that night in Vegas and the hell that we went through, like so now you have a woman and her mother-in-law who apparently got into something in Vegas, which is like, I mean, what that could be a movie right there.
Yeah.
Like what? How is this happening, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, and then sort of, I think ad-libbing a lot of those names of people that like, like Betty Goodman and
Yeah.
Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, Sammy Davis, Sonny Liston, just kind of
Yeah.
thinking of people that spring
Swung in
to
different
mind,
ways.
and
Yeah.
whether or not they went down swinging or not, or maybe he had an idea of like who he wanted to talk about in those, who he wanted to reference in those sections.
Yeah. I mean, you just because you brought up that verse there, I love it when that's to me always the sign of a good writer is someone who gives you enough that you go, well, what happened next? I want to know. Like, I don't know what the end of this story is. And it's like super interesting, right? Because like you said, you could build your own narrative out of that one verse in a million different directions. It's like I always think about it, it's got that same quality that Something Big has, right? Something Big has that same thing where he gives us this story, but it's a bit opaque and you don't know exactly what's going on, and there isn't really any resolution or conclusion to it. He just gives us the sort of these little scenes within it, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, so the next one is Moonlight on the Interstate. She was across the Georgia line, looked out the window, feeling great. Yeah, it had to come in time. And she said, I'm never going back. She said, at last, I'm free. I wish Ma could see me now. She'd be so proud of me. This
Yeah,
is definitely reading like a woman who's getting out of an abusive relationship and like, uh, and just being resilient. It's an
yeah.
interesting, certainly an interesting set of lyrics here. And what a track. I mean,
Yeah, and it
fantastic.
super cool video for this one too. And it's got a couple of that's a B list kind of, but people actors who were around and known, like they were known faces at that point. And I love the sort of it's got this really washed out blue hue color palette to it. And then she's in the diner, and of course, like the rest of the Heartbreakers, are sort of these little background characters, and Tom's just sitting there with his feet up, singing along and whatever. But then you get this weird bit where there's the characters sort of they're almost like angels or something. They're like these spiritual things in this upper plane, which doesn't jive with the rest of the video. But I find that interesting because again, it kind of ties into what the lyrics are doing, right? Where they're giving you this idea of a story without giving you the actual story. I always like it when videos don't necessarily they're not sort of fixed to the narrative of the song, where they give you something else to listen to and watch. I think that's always a kind of a good approach for it.
So those I gave all, 7.5 or above on those. I swing and I gave an eight. Probably deserves
Yeah,
an 8.5. Lonesome Sundown, 7.5. As we get into the rest of this album, maybe we just talk about the highlights in detail, and then kind of briefly talk about maybe what we would describe as the album tracks or the quote unquote
yeah,
filler. I don't know that anything that Petty does really qualifies as filler, but that's what we use for other artists. Accused of Love would qualify for me as kind of an album track. It's a solid up-tempo acoustic number. It does have 979,000 streams, and I'm wondering if that's because it's sort of sandwiched between Swingin' and Echo
right.
on the first half of the album. That is the one, two, fifth most streams on the album, so people like it. Echo um, is definitely one that 51-year-old John likes a lot more than 31-year-old John did.
Yeah,
It hits a lot harder as an adult, having gone through adult relationships and a lot of them, and friendships
yeah,
and others, and just sort of dealing with everything that comes with that. It wasn't released as a single. It has the fourth most streams on the album, 3.9 million. Definitely grew on me in recent years as one of the standout tracks, if not, I mean, it's right there with Room at the Top in terms of structure and
yeah.
tone. What do you think of Echo?
Yeah, I mean, you can see why the album's called Echo, right? When you
Yeah.
when you get this track in it, because this is sort of this is the main thesis of the entire album. And like you said, you do need that weight of years and a bit of an experience behind you to really sort of connect into what he's talking about here. And I'd say it's one of the only very, very few times in the Petty catalog where we really sort of he gets kind of direct and pissed off with with sort of the person he's talking to, right? I mean, think about the lyrics at the end of this song. He does kind of get a bit accusatory which he generally doesn't tend to do. But I mean that's how relationships do end, and there is that sort of bitterness when that comes. So for me, it's the thing about Echo that I find is that it's 6.5 minutes. You would think that's a long song. Like, is there enough there to it does it can you justify 6.5 minutes?
You
And yet
can.
it never drags. It's
Yeah.
never there's no part of it that you could take out to make it better, you know?
Yeah, and this is doesn't mark the change because he did have, It's Good to Be King and some other long
Yeah.
tracks but he always kind of grew up as in the industry as a we get in, get out. You're suspicious of anything over 4 minutes or over three and a
Yeah.
half minutes, really. And you could really see it on this album where he's exploring the time that he has. I mean, Room at the Top is a 5 minute song. Counting on You, which you would kind of describe as, maybe a potential single, 405.
Yeah.
Swinging is 5:30. Another one that just seems like it's the proper length for what is going on there. And then Echo 6:36, the longest track on the album by
Yeah.
almost a minute. Interesting. I think, the CD format also allows that. You can put out 15 songs and they can be an average of 4.5 minutes and you still are fitting it easily. So this is the more space thing, and it doesn't really cost them anymore to put out a CD full of 74 minutes of music versus
Yeah.
an album LP where they have to would press a whole third and fourth side to sort of make that work.
Yeah.
So I think some of those monetary decisions came into it as well.
It's funny that, right? Because you think about that, like we've talked about this definitely, but when you get into the CD era, it is the era of bloat. I mean, you look at Load and Reload by Metallica. I mean, whether or not you're a Metallica fan and whether or not you think they sold out and whatever you think about that, when you go through and list those albums critically, a lot of those songs are overlong and there are too many songs. And you think someone should be saying, look, just because we've got 80 minutes, you don't need to fill it. Even if you trim it down to an hour, it's still an hour. That's a long album, man. You're asking a lot of your listeners to sit down and have that patience to go through that entire listening. But I think that, like you said, I mean, with Petty, because the one thing about Echo, at least with sort of those album tracks, is they're not all the same. I think, like you said, Billy the Kid, we'll end up talking about, I'm sure. Billy the Kid and Swingin' are tonally similar, but really, there's not anything else on the album where you think, yeah, I kind of heard this before on this album, you know?
Uh, yeah, and let's just talk about Billy the Kid.
Yeah,
So when I first heard Echo, this one like stood out as one of my favorite tracks on it. It was not released as a single, and maybe because it's too similar to Swingin'.
right.
But the story behind it's funny. He's getting driven to work by bugs and going through the canyon, and he's trying to like write the lyrics, on a notepad as Bugs is whipping around the corners. And
Yeah,
another like defiant song, kind of talking about the downfall of Billy the Kid, and only 665,000 streams. So Swinging got about 20 times the attention, or has gotten about 20 times the attention. Definitely, if you like swinging or if you like some of the stuff on this album and you haven't really heard Billy the Kid, I would definitely recommend putting that on some playlists because it's a really good track, and I think it should be up further up the track list.
well, I think it's also, again, it's another one of those that is in, like, if you talk to Petty fans about deep cuts, this is one that comes up a lot. Right. And I was going to sort of float this idea to, I think maybe we talked about this before at one point, but when we look at sort of streaming numbers, and especially on a 15-song album, I do think, like, if you think about where people consume or where they stream music, definitely not like if you're sitting down and listening to an album at home, but if you're streaming, you're probably driving into work, or you might be at the gym, or you might be out running or walking or something. And usually, or for a lot of people, you're into sort of that half an hour to 45-minute range there, right? With that kind of stuff. Commutes, half an hour to 45 minutes for a lot of people. So I do sometimes wonder if a lot of those later album tracks on streaming platforms suffer just because they're not within that first half an hour of listening, and whether that sort of impacts, what those numbers look like, especially if they're not singles, and if they are album tracks, and if that sort of hampers their ability to boost their numbers, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guilty of it myself. If I go through and make a greatest hits for a band, and I'm not like as intimately aware of every song like I am with
Yeah.
with Petty. I mean, I have gazillion Petty playlists, but like if I'm going to make one for the Kinks, like my initial thing is going to be I'm going to grab all the singles, I'm
Right.
gonna grab, if there's album tracks with really high stream counts, I'm gonna grab those, and then I'm gonna sort of see where I'm at. And if I really love the band, then I'll go back and start listening to every album,
Yeah.
and then a few times, and then some other songs might pop up as I might only have 200,000 streams, but I love the song, so I'll start adding
Yeah.
that to these playlists. And I think you look at Echo and the second half of it, and Won't Last Long, starting with Won't Last Long through the end. Billy the Kid has the most streams on the second half of the album.
Right.
So it's up there in terms of what people have discovered or dug into in the second half of this album. And I think you're exactly right because Counting on You, Lonesome Sundown, Accused of Love, all in the first half, they're all over 866,000 streams.
Right.
It's just like I'm a numbers guy, so it's interesting to me, like how does some of this happen and how does some of these songs sort of go uh, undiscovered, I guess. But Billy the Kid is one where it's up tempo enough. It probably should have been released as a single, and it probably wasn't because it was pretty similar in tone to Swingin'. And he maybe was like, I don't want to, that's sort of like
Yeah.
Swingin', so I don't want to reduce or release it as another single.
It's interesting. You made an interesting point there, though, too, that, say like Billy the Kid and Swinging, you say you swap places, right? Say you switch those two in the track listing, and say you release Billy the Kid instead of Swinging, I think we'd be saying the same thing about Swinging that we're now saying about Billy the Kid. You know what I mean? Like, because they do have that similarity, but I don't think there's really a difference in quality between the two because I love this song. Like I said, I've written down that some songs are deep, some are whimsical, some are really hooky and poppy, and some are densely layered. And this song is all four without you necessarily even noticing it, right? Because it's one of those brilliantly constructed songs and it's got a bunch of musical ambiguity in it. So I think that you could probably, yeah, either one of those two songs you could have released as that type of song from this album and it would have done just as well, I think.
Yeah, I turned on one of my bootlegs, Irving Plaza show from 1999 yesterday,
Right.
and they played. He said we have an album coming out like tomorrow or something. I don't know when it was really soon after the show, and he's like, it's called "She Goes Down Swinging." So he like either
Yeah.
forgot the title or just was saying the whole lyric as opposed to, but even then I don't think they played Billy the Kid on that show, and I don't think they played Billy the Kid very often live, whereas Swingin' certainly got some plays on that tour,
Yeah.
specifically. I don't know how much it got played outside of that tour, but definitely was played on that tour. Yeah, I went down hard, yeah, but I got up again. I remember you, my baby. I remember you so well. And your house out in the suburbs. You had your wishing well. Be careful who you believe, be careful who you trust. I'm not gonna try to sing, but you can hear them. It's really well done, and it's not
Yeah.
so much a typical strong structure either. It's I don't know, one of my favorite deep cuts for by him for sure.
And I would say for a lot of people, yeah. So 2001, it was played 31 times. Um, where am I here? And then only like three times in 2013, twice in 2003. So it was, again, like you said, I mean, we get into this right where there's so many songs. Like, how the hell do you even
Yeah,
put it? I mean, if you unless you're Springsteen in it, or you're doing the Metallica thing where they do two shows back to back and they have two different set lists, you just can't fit them all in, right? Something's got
yeah,
to give, and Billy's just not going, and neither Billy nor Swinging's going to make it into that set list later on. I think,
yeah. And he's not one to do 3 and 3 plus hour shows. I
No,
mean, I think maybe there was a couple Gainesville shows where they played 26, 27, 30 songs, something like that. But I don't. I That's just thinking off the top of my head because he was pretty much a low 20s,
yeah,
and even later, more like 18, 19 songs and getting out. And I would have loved to have seen a 3.5 hour show, but he might have had his own reasons for that. Certainly, as he got older, he probably couldn't physically
yeah,
do it, especially on that last tour, given everything that was going on with him. Um, so the next one that I love, and I just love it, is No More.
yeah,
Another one that I must have listened to this album enough to really identify Billy the Kid and No More. Although No More, I mean, I liked it all my life that I've since I've heard it, but this is another one that's like really hits different, as you get older.
yeah,
Just the chord guitar progression is just so gorgeous. And for him
Yeah.
to like, I don't know if he's discovered that progression or, like just finding chord progressions after all these years of rock and roll
Yeah.
is amazing to me. Because I mean, I don't have as tuned of an ear where I'm like, okay, well, this is really the same progression as this song from 15 years ago or whatever, but it
Right.
just sounds different because they're either slowing it down or speeding it up or using a different kind of guitar or whatever. And I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but to make it sound like his own and just the sort of the tone of the song, just really an
Yeah.
incredible one. One of my favorite like ballads by him.
And well, it's a 10 out of 10 for me, this one, just
Yeah.
because, like you, like I said, this is one, it's kind of like it'll all work out. When you hit that song on Let Me Up, you're just like, what the hell? This is buried on this album where why isn't everyone just going gaga over this? And it's one of those that sort of I always feel that feeling of sort of love and peace and tranquility, even though it's definitely not like there isn't a happy conclusion necessarily to this song, but I've always thought that this is sort of that him drawing that philosophical line in the sand, right? No more. That's it. We're done. I'm not going to compromise on relationships. I'm not going to compromise on my artistic vision. I'm not going to compromise in any part of my life from this point forward. And I think when you sort of look at that in the context of what he then goes on to do with Last DJ, I mean, Last DJ is a punch back at the industry. Highway Companion, he goes and does just a true solo record where with no co-writes. Mojo, where we do a blues album. Reforms Mudcrutch, Hypnotic Eyes are sort of this closer. So it was that thing of like, I'm done with all that. No more. I love that sort of idea that it's this fine. There's the finality to that statement where it's like, no more compromise. It's just all petty from now on. So,
Yeah, I sort of think it should be held in the same regard as like Angel Dream.
100%. I'm with
Yeah,
you on
like
this. Yeah.
a couple million, 3 million, 5 million streams,
Yeah.
on a lot of playlists and it's only got 440,000, 43,000. It's the least streamed, least streamed song on the album. Sorry, about to give
That's
out. The next track is
crazy.
is 16,000 fewer streams, but that's crazy to me. Like No More it's up there. Yeah, that's a shame, but we need to fix that.
But
Uh,
you talk there about it's funny because when you talk about, you know, the chord progression is really simple. It's definitely been used before, but it's that combination of when a guitarist is just sitting around noodling, they find something. Because lots of my friends are musicians. I've sat in my friend Randy's studio and heard him do it, where he'll just be noodling around. He'll be playing his acoustic guitar, and I'll be, hey, I like that. But sometimes it's if they're playing because there's lots of different places on the fretboard that you can play the same chord, right? And it's not
right.
going to sound exactly the same. And that move from this chord to that chord at this position sounds different from moving from the same chord to the same chord in a different position. And then if you add in the guitar tone as well, so even sometimes picking up and plugging through a different effects unit or a different amp, it'll give you a slightly different tone. You think about Mojo, right, with Mike, all that's built around that Gibson Les Paul guitar tone. So all those little things factor in, which is why we get a song that could be the same progression as a million others, but it feels unique and it feels distinct because of all those things coming together. They just land, and then when it's in the hands of a bunch of geniuses, well,
Yeah.
then they take it to the next level.
I mean, you got Mike Campbell and Tom Petty there figuring this out. Um, Not only just as guitar players, as songwriters, but also now they have quite a few years under their belt as producers
Yeah,
that can sort of make this happen. And the descending nature of those chords, it's very powerful emotionally.
yeah,
Really, just a really great track. And the last one I want to specifically shout out is One More Day, One More Night, which is, a really great way to end this
yeah.
album. Um, because it does offer a bit of hope and not, I wouldn't say upbeatness or anything like that, but like it doesn't leave you like you could go no more at the end of this and it'd be kind of a downer, but they, brought it back with a, 5 minute, 37-second song,
Yeah.
which is another, it's, sort of feels a bit like Lonesome Sundown or some of the Wildflower stuff. You know, a good way to close it.
It's to me, it's the only way you can close this album, right? I mean, like you said, I mean, you could do no more because, like I said, that would almost tie into that line in the sand idea. But this one, like if you're going to put this one on the album, I don't think you can put this song anywhere else. It's got to close. Like if it's going to be on there, it's got to close. And I was going to ask you, I don't know if you're one of my favorite movies is that one of my favorite franchises is the Shrek franchise, which I watched endlessly with my kids growing up. And there's a song called "I Need Some Sleep" by Eagles from the Shrek 2 soundtrack, and it always kind of has a little bit of a flavor of that to me. You know what I mean? So, and that was released in Eels did that one in 2004. So I kind of wonder if that's one of those little influences creeping in there. You know, sometimes you hear that with newer acts, think, hang on, they're just doing a Petty thing there, or they're doing a Dire Straits thing there, or they're doing whatever. I wonder if that was kind of a, I think, and I mean, the whole hook of this song though is that jagged stop start chorus that comes super super. I mean, I don't know if it's a chorus or a bridge, but it's super super cool because that's that iconic moment. And then, you know, like you said, I mean, it is a long song, and it's sort of over by about 3:30. And then we get a whole bunch of soloing and great guitar playing. And I think it's sort of trading back and forth between Mike and Tom, or Mike and Scott, possibly. Of a couple of the people online say they think it's only Mike, but to me, there's two different guitar tones in there. But yeah, man, I mean, it's a great way to close out this album for sure.
I saw my wife and I saw Eels, I think twice.
Okay.
Once in a pretty small the observatory in OC, Orange County here, was one of our favorite venues. If anybody's interested in listening to them, they have a great track called "Fresh Feeling," which is a kind of an underrated. I don't know if it's a. I think they might have released it as a single, but it wasn't a big hit or anything like that. So check out "Fresh Feeling" by the Eels. I think his name is E, the lead singer.
Right.
He's very quirky guy, kind of insular and really good songwriter, prolific as well. I mean, obviously not at the level of Tom Petty in terms of fame or anything like that or success, but you know, kind of a guy who does things his own way too. So
Right.
he does have that in common. Just to I mean, before we get into producer of the day, just to sort of touch on the ones we haven't talked about. Accused of Love, I mentioned, was a solid up-tempo acoustic number. I think it's a solid song. I gave it a
Yeah.
7. Won't Last Long. Kind of an underrated up-tempo rocker is what I wrote down for that one. I Don't Want to Fight, which is the only non-Petty vocaled track, and it was jarring when I
Yeah.
first listened to it to hear Mike Campbell on vocals. But this is him, launching his solo career, his band on the side, the Dirty Knobs. A preview of that. I think it's a pretty good track. I kind of want to hear Tom sing whenever I put on a Tom record. So
Yeah.
when I want to hear Mike sing, I put on a Dirty Knobs record. Uh, this one's for me. Gave it a 6. I didn't really write any notes about it, but this one's for me. This one's for me. Like it,
Okay, so
nothing.
here's my what I'd sort of commented on this where there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good song, but it's one of those where it's like it's one of those few things where it's like it was petty by numbers. It's like
Yeah,
this is something he could knock off on his way to the grocery store. Like if someone said, oh, "We need an extra track for the album," Tom can do this in 15 minutes. You know what I mean?
right.
And it's not to say there's not work put into it, but it's just one of those where it's like we've definitely heard you do this before. Definitely heard this before, right? And the one, I don't want to fight. Like I was going to float this to you. Do you think that sort of, like I said, Tom's in a bad way during the recording of this album to the point where, Bugs calls Mike and says that, dude, Tom's in a bad way. And Mike says, well, bring him to the studio. We'll give him something to do. And I know that this was one where they played it through and Tom said, Mike, you just sing it. So I wonder if it's Tom sort of recognizing, his wingman is there for him when he's at a sort of a creative lull or is a personal lull. Okay, then I'll put it on the record. And I like the song enough. We'll put it on there and we'll sort of give that to Mike, maybe. There's an element of
Yeah,
that, perhaps.
yeah, and it makes sense that I mean that was his only co-write credit according to Discogs on this album.
Soul,
So,
right? It's Mike Campbell Soul.
oh, solo
Buddy
right.
doesn't
That's right.
even. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you're right. You're right. Solo. So just giving him a track.
Yeah.
It
Nothing
only
wrong with
took how
that.
many records? Uh, this was for me. About to Give Out. I don't know. I was listening to the lyrics of this one. I don't know what it's supposed to be about. It's just a guy who's like going out on the town a lot, like a lot.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of hijinks happening. So from that aspect of it, it's pretty interesting. There's interesting characters and stuff in it. I think it's a pretty good rocker. And then Rhino Skin, which I I know I see it's got a 605 streams, second most in the second half of this album. So I know fans probably like it. I'm just not a big fan of it.
Yeah. Well, there's always those songs in the catalog. I mean, it's that thing you almost feel apologetic, especially with Petty, right? Saying, oh, I don't really like that song.
Yeah.
It's fine. Like, I mean, and that's where I get into with, doing this podcast and then doing other podcasts. Like I said, I can recognize the musical brilliance of it, everything else, but there are some songs where I just think, yeah, but it's at the end of all that, it's just simply not for me. This one I do like Rhino Skin. Just musically, I think there's some really interesting decisions that they go in for here, but I know that the lyrics are definitely jarring for a lot of people where I think it's one of those binary ones. You either love it or you don't really like it. Like I don't think there's not that many people who go, yeah, that's fine. Like see it's fucking great. Oh, that's great. Or I don't really care about it.
So there are three B-sides. I Don't Belong,
Yeah,
Sweet William. I Don't Belong's kind of a up-tempo acoustic number. Sweet William's like a blues rock.
yeah,
They did play that live a few times, Sweet William. I think they liked it in more as a live track. And then Gainesville, which people may or may not know, just a song about his hometown.
yeah,
Um, so for producer of the day, I would, if I were asked to quote unquote keep it keep it as a CD and switch something, I
yeah,
would put I Don't Belong in for Rhino Skin at 14 and just do a one for one swap. But what I thought was interesting, since this kind of the theme of the podcast or the theme of the era is a bit of excess or bloat, I thought it'd be interesting to challenge myself to make a LP version of this where it's fitting. And I know you're a big time nerd in terms of it's got to fit on the 44 minute. If I came up with something that was 44 minutes, 50 seconds, I'd be like, okay, well, we could, they would fix it in editing or, trim
yeah.
down a song here or there or whatever if they couldn't fix it. But specifically for you, I made my 9 track version and it wasn't like painful. Like cutting what I cut wasn't too painful. And I've been listening to this like nonstop for the last week or two. It's a 9 track album. It starts with Room at the Top, Counting on You, Free Girl Now, Lonesome Sundown. So no changes there. And then I think we're closing side A with Billy the Kid. And that
Yeah.
was due to some time constraints, but it was an easy swap with Swingin', because of the kind of the tone and defiance and everything. And then that puts Swingin' on the second half of the album, which is already pretty strong. You got Echo, Swingin', No More, and One More Day, One More Night. And this is a 42-minute, 18-second version of this album, and it is tight.
Yeah, I mean, you sent that to me a couple of weeks ago, and I've listened to it through a few times too, and it's like, yeah, man, there's some of the songs that are missing. I mean, I love Accused of Love, and I love there's, and I like Rhino Skin, and there's all. But when you listen to that nine, I mean, I would encourage folks to do it. I'll put the playlist up on Spotify, Apple, and all the different places where you can go listen to it. It really is good. Like I think, and that's the argument for tightening, right? Is when
Yeah.
and I think a long album's fine, and you couldn't cut Wildflowers, right? We both agreed when we were talking about. There's no way you can pare Wildflowers down,
No, you
and
should
actually, I don't.
expand it.
You
It
should,
should have been a 8 sides, right?
yeah, but when you look at this and when you listen to those 9 tracks you just said in sequence, it becomes now you're starting to talk about, well, is this now a top 5 Petty album? It might be in that format.
And the reason I did that was because we talked about Bloat, the CD era, and we
Yeah,
both noticed this as we got into that era of albums, basically. And I wanted to cut this to 9 or 10 and 44 minutes so that I could compare it to the debut album or compare it
yeah,
to Damn the Torpedoes or Long After Dark or Southern Accents or any of these where they are working within those time constraints. And how does this hold up against that? And I think if you listen to this, it holds up really well. Like he is still like if he was still constrained with the 44 minute, he could knock out a really good album if he had trimmed it, to this and edited it to this
yeah,
level. And then I will say that after I did that, I took the other 5 songs or 6 songs and just sort of listened to them in a row, and they made a very interesting EP,
yeah,
like a second thing that could be put out, or a B-sides type, deal. Still really good tracks because they're petty tracks, but to me, not on the exact same level as Room at the Top, Free Girl Now, Lonesome Sundown, Echo, Billy the Kid,
yeah.
Swingin', No More. I mean, it just goes on. Like, So this to me might be my way of listening to Echo now because I think in the past, turning it on and it's 15 songs and an hour long,
Yeah,
not getting through the whole thing most of the time due to the reasons you were talking about before, I can put this on 42 minutes and be done, in
yeah.
a commute or driving my son to school or something like that. So yeah, the LP version, that's the way to go for me.
There's one thing there that too I was wondering about because when you think about 99 into 2000 and especially like further on and into today, singles really aren't a thing. It's streaming and they release a song and most artists release, I don't know, eight, nine, you look at Taylor Swift, almost everything off the bloody albums are released as singles. But because you don't have like a single or CD single or a physical single, you don't have B-sides. So
Right.
that idea of a B-side's almost sort of been a little bit lost as well because like you said, I mean, a lot of these, if I don't want to fight, if that turns up as a B-side and it's Mike singing, everyone's just going to lose them. I said, this is phenomenal. This is great. I love this B-side. Then you can have that argument, oh, it should be on the album, right? But I think you're right. I mean, I think condensing it definitely makes sense. Now, I would say too, though, next time you do it, if you approach things, because we're gonna have Mojo's Long as well. That's a long album. If you sort of start thinking about doing the same thing, which I suspect you might want to on that album as well, you can go to 24 minutes on a side.
Okay.
Because as Vanel, you could go to 24. No, that wouldn't really help you here because there's no 2 minute songs, right? So you wouldn't
Right.
really be able to sneak another song in anyway. But just I'll throw that out to you as a bone. But so
Yeah, it would
my
need.
producer for the day. Go ahead, sorry.
I was just gonna say 48 would give me about six, 5.5 minutes. So maybe, but I don't know if I could, if either side, it might have gone over on either side. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, I don't think I
Yeah.
could stay under 24. But then are you also losing some sound quality when you do that?
You compress it a little bit, yeah. So,
Yeah.
like I said, 22 that's your ideal, right? And that's why those all albums were that's because
Or,
that's the way the format was developed, right? So you do because what basically if you think about the grooves on an album, if you make those narrower, you lose a little bit of fidelity. Now, most people with a set of human normal ears are never going to hear it. It's like all these people. Oh yeah, I mean, I prefer the German presses because they're just so much better. You in a blind taste test, there's no way you can tell the difference, mate. You're just being pretentious, right? So I don't think it much matters, but there is a sort of a true loss there. But
all right, two things I wanted to say in response to it's interesting what people are doing today where they release a single on streaming. A lot of bands are doing the same kind of process right now. They have an album coming out in 6 months or whatever. They start to release singles, and so like
yeah,
one will have the first whatever single off the album, and that's it. The second one will have the second single plus the first one. The third
okay,
one will have three, the third one plus the second one plus the first one. And what they're trying to do, I think, is get people familiar with the album before it comes out and perhaps say, okay, here are four or five singles off of it before it even comes out. Now, do you want to go buy it on vinyl? Because that's what the primary, I think, medium now is to purchase it.
going back again, yeah,
But also get them like familiar with the album before they hear it. So when they do hear it, they like it, and then they are generating some buzz or telling their friends about it or whatever. It's completely different than the previous way where you do have a single and a B-side, and they were
yeah,
trying to get people to buy the physical copy of the single so that they could get the B-side, the completest, because there's every artist has their super fans that want everything.
yeah,
And that was the only, in the day, that was the only way to get everything. It's still, I would say, you could argue that there's physical stuff that isn't available on streaming for Petty and for other bands. But the other comment I wanted to make, and I thought of it when we were talking about the bloat and how you don't have to use 74 minutes, you don't have to use 80 minutes.
yeah,
That is true, except for the only thing that frustrated me was greatest hits compilations where they would just 62 minutes or something like that. And they've got
yeah,
18 more minutes. They're leaving four or five great tracks off, or even like if they weren't big singles, just minor singles, or yeah, this is a fan favorite. Like, let's put this on and let's use the 74 or 80 minutes in
yeah,
that situation because it's not like you're asking somebody to sit down and listen to 20 new songs in a row. These are like fan favorites, hits, whatever. You can put those on and at a party or whatever, and you've got everything. But then, when we were in our day, you're picking up the greatest hits for a certain band, and you're sitting there, and it's at 65 minutes, and you're like, they left, two of my top 10
yeah.
songs off. Now you're having to like rip your own CD so that you can have everything on one on one collection, right?
Yeah, it's those kind of decisions. I find those fascinating, right? I'd love to know what is the decision making process behind that. How do you leave jamming me off greatest hits? Like, how what's the creative? We talked about that when we did that episode, but I think you could definitely make. I mean, obviously with an artist like Petty, there's so much that you could fill a 120-minute CD easily, whatever. But if you are doing a multi-format release, then you're gonna have to be cognizant of, okay, well, if I've got four sides of an album, how does that balance? Now, of course, like you said, within 74 minutes, you've got that's a double album. So I don't know. I think it's sort of that balance of, well, we really want to just hit them with absolutely what we think is our strongest stuff, and we'll put that out there. Or, there are some artists who do greatest hits where they're a little bit more single one, single two, single three, single four, and that's just linear. And so however long that is, that's how long it is. They don't bother putting anything else on there. But in terms of modern sort of release strategies or processes, I found that really interesting talking to Matt Jaffe, who was a guest on, I think he came back on last season to talk about his new album. And he released, there's 10 songs on that album, fantastic album. And he released 9 as singles before the album came out and I was talking to him about that specifically because, for us old meatheads, you have a lead single, then the album comes out, and then there's 2 or 3 more singles. That's the way
Yeah.
to do it, right? But he said because the way that you have to promote these days on social media, you need to keep having a single so that you can change your reels. So you've got a new song coming out, and there's something else that you can put on just because people are so bloody ADD and they
Right.
can't stand to not have something new every 5 minutes. That it's just changed the way that artists have to release this stuff. And you see it with, I mean, Taylor Swift, like I said, would be a good example of that as well, and U2 and all these bands where they are releasing lots of content in the run up to an album. And then it's sort of almost, well, you can buy the album if you like, and that would be great if you bought a physical copy of it. But at that point, you already know all the songs anyway, which I'd said to Matt, like, he released 2 or 3 songs and then I stopped listening. I waited for the album because I want the album because to me, that's how I listen to music. I want to hear the whole rather than just the individual parts of it.
And that's your old head
Yeah,
rearing itself.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wasn't, excuse me, I wasn't even trying to throw shade at Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, but I just went back and looked at the greatest hits, and it was 65 minutes, so it must have traumatized me. But we did a whole episode on
Yeah.
greatest hits and how we would quote unquote fix it and what was left
Yeah.
off and why was it left off. But great example of like, especially for him,
Yeah.
given all the albums that he had released and all the songs and great songs that he had released to that point, why are you leaving anything off when you have the
Yeah.
74 minutes? I know there's maybe an argument or you don't want to give him everything because then they won't go buy the
Yeah.
album for Jam and Me or for whatever that you left off. But it's nice to have it all in one place if you're a fan, like just to be able to throw on if you just want to listen to Petty's hits and
For sure.
be able to do that. Interesting note on that social media that you were talking about because I'm into this band called Royal Otis and they're from Australia and they like I follow them on Instagram and they're hitting you and they're emailing and they're I think it's also a
Right.
way for them to announce their album in a way that back in the day they'd have to do like a big blitz like right as it's happening, but
Yeah.
now it's like teasing the album. Okay, it comes out in a month, it comes out in 3 weeks, it comes out in 2 weeks, it comes out in a
Yeah.
week. So if you're not getting all of those, if you get one of them, now you know that this band has an album coming out at least because
Yeah.
get reaching your fans is not as straightforward as it used to be. Now, some of them might be following you on socials, some might not. And then like, how do you permeate all this and get it to where everybody's sort of excited about your album release? But half the singles have now, or half the tracks have now been released.
Yeah. I mean, you just think about your own feed, right? On Facebook or Instagram, wherever it might be. If you don't see something from someone in a while, you sort of forget about them.
Yeah,
And then when they pop, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot I was following that person, whatever it might be. So that constancy of being on the feed, it's manufactured this artificial need to do it this way, just to comply with what everyone's expectations are, right? And it's not. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. I don't know if moving society that way where everything's got to be you've got to be kind of talking to bah 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 listen to me I'm still here. I don't know whether that's a good thing either, but it just is what it is, right? So my producer for the day, I took a different tack to it, and I didn't. I sort of did my side A, side B because I always like organizing things in that way. Just that's the way my brain works, like you said. But I trimmed it down to 12 because I think 12 would be a perfect length, and I did do a cut and add one of the B sides in. So I went same as you, I'm not really tinkering too much with the first five. So Room at the Top, Counting on You, Free Girl Now, Lonesome Sundown Swinging, Accused of Love, and then open side B with Echo, Billy the Kid, No More, and then I went with I Don't Belong. And I love that song. That's one that you do think, man, I can sort of, I can see an argument for Won't Last Longer, I Don't Want to Fight, This One's for Me, and that's got to be in there as well. I Don't Belong. So I think that's it's at least as good quality wise as any of those songs. And it's one of those two that I could hear Adam Duritz singing. It sounds like a Counting Crow song a little bit. I know that obviously Petty's God would be an influence for him. So and then round out with About to Give Out and One More Day, One More Night. So
Okay.
I went 12. So
And
again, like,
does that fit on an LP
no,
or no?
no,
No, no.
absolutely not.
Okay,
No.
you don't care. Yeah.
Well, no, I should say that it would do if you took the Bjork approach. If you ever pick up an album called Homogenic by Bjork, and it is rammed, like I mean, the run out is like, I don't know, a millimeter. It's insane, because it's like packed out as far as you can possibly go. Which again, I mean, if you're a super nerd, you could probably hear a bit of a quality difference. But so I didn't pay any attention to that this time. I'm just breaking all my own rules. So
Make sure you send that to me as well. I haven't listened to that version yet. I'd be interested to listen to that. I do like
I'll
I
do
Don't
that.
Belong. I wish I had space for it on my LP version.
All right, well, let's wrap up a little bit because and we haven't done this consistently, but let's go back to our EP. So if you're picking three songs to throw at people, to sort of give them an overview of this album, or even just to sort of say these are my three favorite songs from the album, what are you going with?
That's tough. That's real tough. I'm gonna have to go with Room at the Top. And then I think I would go for if we're doing a EP. I don't know if you're gonna pick what I would pick. Room at the Top, Free Girl Now, and then No More.
Well, we've got two of the same. So the only one I would change is I'd put Echo in for Free Girl Now, just because Echo is such a statement song on this record, and I know that Room at the Top, Echo, No More is hardly a it's hardly a pick me up, jolt of caffeine, but I sort of think that those three songs would tent pole, what's going on this album. So
Yeah, I would like for people to listen to Room. If I were just to say, here are three songs from the album to get you a feel for the album, I would probably send them Room at the Top, Billy the Kid, and No More, just to give them two
yeah,
like underrated tracks because they're probably gonna like if they go to the album, they're probably gonna like Free Girl Now and Echo and Swingin' and all that. And then they would also know two more, but it depends on your strategy as you're trying to convert people
that's a
to be a
really
to
good
be a
call,
petty
man.
head.
I really like that. Room at the Top, Billy the Kid, No More. I think we go with that. I think that's the one. I think that's how we do it.
Yeah, I don't know. Hate to cut any
I
of
think
these
that's how we
tracks,
do it.
especially off my LP version.
Yeah.
Now, there's actually there's a company on it that's probably illegal, but they will put. I think if you own the music or whatever, then you can do this. But they will create a LP, a vinyl version
Right.
of whatever you want, two sides. That would be very interesting to have that created and then be able to actually listen to it on an album. I'm not a big vinyl guy, so I
Yeah.
don't really care a whole lot, but I think it would be cool to have an LP version of Echo.
That's funny because I mean, yeah, there's lots of services that'll do custom vinyl. I was actually thinking of doing one for my mum of all my, my songs. Um, the thing with that is though that I wonder how they get around the mastering because you have to master differently for vinyl, and you sort of need specific mixes of the song. So if I don't know if you're ripping that directly off the vinyl to digital, or you're taking the CD copy because the CD copy is not the same. It's
Hmm.
not the same master. Like it's a different master for CD and for streaming than it's for vinyl. So I kind of wonder because I was talking to my buddy about that when I want to do this album for my mum and probably get one for my kid. But he said, "Well, yeah, you'll have to get them mastered." And I was like, "Okay, can you do that?" He said, "Yeah, I can. It won't be perfect because I don't. It's not my forte." I was like, okay, well, how much would it cost to get it mastered? He said, about 1,500 a song. I was like, what? No, no, I can't afford that, dude. You do it. You do it and we'll live with it. So, all right. Is there anything else we need to cover, John?
I think we got it. I think we nailed it.
We got it. Last DJ next. So you said like, we're heading into the sort of part of Petty's catalog where you're not as deep all the time on that. So last DJ, just give us a precursor. Where are you at with that one?
It holds a special place in my heart. Not my favorite album of his, but I did see Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers perform it live, front to back, plus a few hits at the end at the Olympic. I think it's called the Olympic Auditorium. It was an old boxing arena in LA. I took the train up and walked over to the venue. I was sick as a dog, but I wasn't gonna miss. I wasn't gonna miss it, so I apologize if I got anybody sick on that as I sat there by myself listening to the concert. My wife couldn't go to that one. Um,
Wow.
that's an interesting album. I like a lot of the songs on it. I wasn't crazy about the biggest single, Last DJ.
Okay.
Not one. That's not one that I put on. I do have it on playlists, that are all encompassing, but I can get into more
Yeah.
about that as we talk about it. But that there are some really good album tracks on that one
Yeah.
for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, well let's wrap it up. So until we meet again next week, keep listening to and sharing Tom's music. Try to be kind. Try to say I love you to someone at least once a day. Stay safe and healthy, and I'll be back with you next week for a fan chat with a wonderful little fellow named Rich Gibson. So I'll see you then. Bye bye.